Hey, what's up, seventh graders? This is Utah Studies coming from Mr. Kai's on April 1st, 2020. So today we're going to be talking about the Utah War. That's our next focus of study. And we're going to be looking at an event that occurred shortly after Utah became a territory. Um, like I said, it's called the Utah War. Now, what happened? This is on, by the way, pages 145 through 151 in your text, and I have a copy of those pages in your notes in the module there. But the state of Utah was almost completely Mormon, but they became a territory which was owned by the federal government, the United States government, and the federal government sent some judges that were not Mormon out to Utah to be judges there. And the judges didn't like it. They weren't there very long. They didn't feel accepted. And they immediately went back to uh, the United States government and spread rumors about corruption by Brigham Young in Utah Territory. In fact, they even said that the Mormons were trying to uprise against the United States government, mostly led by a guy named William Drummond. Judge William Drummond, he was the third judge, and he told the president of the United States that Brigham Young was going to overthrow the national government. He convinced Congress and the president, and so he forced President Buchanan. Now, President James Buchanan is the president at the time, president of the United States, and President Buchanan decides that he is going to send a group of soldiers to Utah to replace Brigham Young with a guy named Alfred Cumming as governor. Okay. He's going to replace Brigham Young as governor and get one of his own men in power there. He decides to gather up a troop of 2,500 soldiers led by a man named Albert Sidney Johnston. So now we call this Johnston's Army because this group of men going west to stop the uprising or the supposed uprising of Brigham Young is led by Colonel Albert Sidney Johnston, and they call it the Utah Expedition. Okay, they call it the Utah Expedition, led by Colonel Albert Sidney Johnston. So quickly, let's just review. The judges tell the government that Utah is corrupt and creating an uprising. Judge William Drummond is the lead voice in that. He convinces Congress that this is what's happening. President Buchanan has no choice. He organizes a group of soldiers called the Utah Expedition to go down and put down that uprising led by Colonel Johnston. So we call it Johnston's Army. Now, on the other side, in Utah, Brigham Young's like, well, we better prepare for war. So he does some things to prepare for war. He creates a militia of volunteers of nearly 5,000 Mormons, 5,000 Mormons that are going to be willing to fight for Utah. And he sends his captain of militia named Lot Smith, Captain Lot Smith, and 75 of their best soldiers into Wyoming to harass Johnston's army. Now, this is comical because they burn wagon supplies, they drive off animals, and they even burn down Fort Bridger because Fort Bridger was where the army was going to get all its supplies to restock its supplies. So more than anything, they slowed Johnston's army down. Okay, never once killing anybody, never once doing any hand-to-hand combat, but just being a pest, really, like a gnat. Burned supplies, drove off animals, and even took down Fort Bridger. Now, on the other end, Brigham Young's like, well, let's move everybody south to Provo. He moved everybody out of Salt Lake and basically emptied Salt Lake out. So by the time Johnston's army got there, no one was there. Okay, Salt Lake City was completely abandoned. They found no uprising. Fact is, they didn't find anything. But they stayed there for a while. Now, a man named Thomas Kane, interestingly enough, he's not Mormon, but he came in and brokered a deal. Now, what I mean by that is he got in with President Buchanan and Brigham Young and brokered a deal. That means he got them together and worked it out. Okay, he was the middleman. Okay, he was a friend of the Mormons and he brokered a deal where they could agree on a conclusion to this Utah war. And they agreed Brigham Young agreed to have Alfred Cumming come in and take over as governor. And eventually, I'll get that out of the way there. Eventually, the Johnson's army would leave. They would return to the east because the Civil War would begin, and those men were needed elsewhere. Okay, so that's the Utah War in a nutshell. In just a second, we're going to watch a video that kind of gives you a little more insight on what happened during the Utah War. So, but these are your notes. What's important about your notes for this, including the notes and the textbook. Here's the textbook, and this is in the module. But at the end of the module, you'll notice that you're going to take a test. That's what the T stands for. It's 10 questions. The test is 10 questions. You have 20 minutes to take the test. You actually have 3 attempts at the test. Okay, that's important to know. You have 3 attempts to take the test. But this is the most important thing. Canvas will take your most recent score or your latest score. So if you take the test 3 times, the score you're going to get is your 3rd time. Okay, it's going to take the latest score. And those notes will be very helpful when taking the test. All 10 questions come out of these notes. Okay, so that is the Utah War. I want to watch a quick video that kind of illustrates what happened. I say what happens like it happens. What happened during this uprising.
Approaching dire circumstances. The President of the United States, James Buchanan, having received false and ruinous reports of sedition and treason by this people, has ordered troops from the United States Army to march to our beloved territory to put down this supposed insurrection. They lie at our doorstep as I speak. It is for this cause that I have issued instructions for all able-bodied men to stand forth and aid in the burying of the temple footings and foundation, the cashing of the stones therein, and the removal of all the public shops on Temple Block. Brethren, we must not allow this sacred, hallowed ground to be defiled or desecrated.
I don't like the looks of this, General.
Howard!
Sir, Lieutenant, take a couple of men and check out this compound.
Smith!
Roberts!
Stand fast!
Checks out, sir. Just some farmer's field.
Field? In the middle of the city? What'll these Mormons think of next?
I think They are ready to burn this city to the ground should we so much as fire a shot. Now let's move it, Colonel. I see nothing for us to do here. Electric lights!
Satisfied that General Johnston and his army were to inflict no harm nor pose a threat any longer to the Saints, President Brigham Young soon thereafter announced that it was safe for all to return to their homes.
As you can see, the army arrived and really found a Salt Lake City abandoned. And in that clip specifically, they talk about burying the Salt Lake Temple, the one that still stands today. They buried that temple to hide it from the soldiers. So that is the Utah War. It lasted not very long, and there wasn't any shots fired. There's just simply a miscommunication regarding what was going on in Utah. And you have to understand, the Mormons were pushed out of their homes in Missouri and then Ohio and Illinois. And so they were not about to be pushed out of Utah. Okay, so this week, let's talk about the discussion. One of the things you're going to do is read, obviously, through the textbook, pages 145 through 151. As you can see, they're right here on the discussion and in the module. But I want you to answer this question in the discussion post. Write a brief explanation of what caused the Utah War. I want you to talk about Drummond, the judges, President Buchanan, Johnston's army, things of that nature. And then I want you to answer this question: why did President Buchanan feel it was necessary to send troops to Utah? So that's the discussion. Let's talk about the assignment. The assignment is in the next module, the next link over. Now, this is not complicated, but it's going to require you to do a little research. What you're going to do is there's a Google Doc, or excuse me, it's actually a Google slide that's attached to this document that has 6 slides. One is titled Runaway Officials, President Buchanan Prepares for War, Utah Prepares for War, Buchanan's Blunder, the Move South, and the End of the War. Now, if you go back to the textbook, you will see that each one of those is the same as these subtitles within the text. So, for example, Runaway Officials is the first one. That's in this first page 145. President Buchanan Prepares for War, Utah Prepares for War. So each one of these slides represents a subtitle, a subsection in the chapter. What you are going to do, you are going to do 2 things. You are going to finish this sentence stem. So you're going to finish this sentence in this box. The runaway officials contributed to the Utah War by, and then you're going to finish the sentence. And then in this bottom box, you're going to list all the facts, names, and dates from that section. You can just bullet point them, okay? You can just sit down here and bullet point. For one of the names would be, obviously, William Drummond. He's the judge that went back and started some rumors, okay? So you can just bullet point all the facts, names, and dates. And you're going to do that for all 6 of these sections, okay? You're going to finish the sentence stem, list the facts, names, and dates. Okay, that's the assignment. And the instructions are up here in case you missed it or in case you didn't listen to my awesome instructions just barely. That's the assignment. And then the final thing you'll do this week is the test. And we'll be done. That is the test. So if you go back to modules, you have the notes, the textbook, the discussion, the assignment, and the test. And in a moment, I'll add the video. And that is it for this week. That is the Utah War in a nutshell. Hope you are all doing great. Let me know if you have any questions.